I do better when I can do when I have that balance between science and math and art. I need that balance, and I wasn't finding it in coding.
Welcome to the LabVIEW experiment. I am your host, Sam Taggart from SAS Workshops. In my 15 years of working with and training developers, I've had the opportunity to conduct a lot of experiments. Over here, we believe in embracing failure as the essential learning experience that it is. And what better way to learn than from other people's mistakes? In this podcast, I talk to industry experts, colleagues, and friends about their failures and how they have turned them into future successes. I'm here today with Alan and his daughter Meghan. So many of you know Alan Smith. I've interviewed him before. He's very well known in the LabVIEW community. He's the actor framework guy, amongst other things. And some of you may have heard him mention his daughter Meghan. She's been to the GDAV cons. You gave a presentation at the recent one, didn't you? Like seven
Yeah,
by seven
I
together
did.
or something? Yeah.
We
Okay.
did a 7 by 7 together.
Great. Okay, cool. I honestly think I missed that because as you say, Alan, I was doing Mr. Rick or whatever, right? Like walking around trying to make sure everything was
Monsieur,
working
yeah,
correct. Right?
Monsieur Rick from Casablanca. Someone walks up and says, Sam, we need a thing, and you sign a thing, and you send them on their way.
Yeah. There's a lot like running a conference is not the same as attending. Even though I was there, I was not paying attention to the presentations as much as I would have liked. So
Well, it's a great 7 by 7 presentation, Sam, and really it'll. And we actually got done in early. I watched it recently, and we were just a shade over 6 minutes. So you might spend more time. Well, no, because you just have where the YouTube page is. Really, it's worth the 6 minutes of your time to pull that up and
I will. Yeah. No.
watch it.
Yeah. Kevin did a great job with the videos. They are definitely good. So Kevin does
Mhm.
very good, high quality work. So we
Yes,
appreciate
I agree.
that. So actually, this was all Taylor's idea to invite Megan and Alan on, but I think it's a great idea. Taylor thought that it would be interesting to explore the dynamics of teaching LabVIEW and learning LabVIEW and, an outsider's view on the LabVIEW community and what it's like. And so I thought that would be very interesting.
So, as Sam says, I am Alan C. Smith. I have been active in the LabVIEW community as a developer for 30 years, and this summer I'll have been an architect for 20. Um, I've I've worked for partners. I am an alliance partner. I did a stint at National Instruments, which is where I did most of my work on Actor Framework itself. I wrote all the tools that you use that ship with LabVIEW for Actor Framework. It's a large part of my regular work, and I currently offer services as a consulting architect. So I help customers sometimes rescue projects, sometimes start projects from scratch, trying to build systems with good, sustainable architectures for the long haul. And As Sam mentioned, I've been my daughter. We homeschool our daughter, and we actually taught her LabVIEW as part of her STEM. One of the great things about working from home and doing that is that I was able to do so. And then this last summer, I brought her on formally and officially as an intern, and she did a little work for me. And I think this is where it would be a good idea for you, Megan, to say a little bit more from your perspective on sort of who you are and what your background is.
As a homeschooler, I've been really, really focused on getting ready for college and being successful in college. Um, for me, most of that looks like doing dual enrollment classes in addition to online curriculum and LabVIEW and other computer, mostly LabVIEW.
So can I ask a question? What is the most interesting class that you took that you feel like maybe you wouldn't have got at a normal public school?
I would have had to wait a few more years for the two history classes I'm taking, and I probably wouldn't have gotten this one teacher I absolutely love.
Huh? What type of
I
history
love it.
class was it?
Um, Currently working through U.S. history, 1 and 2.
Okay, cool.
And you had a uh, medieval Europe history class, right?
That is medieval and Mesopotamian history, going going from the beginning of what we think is the beginning of civilization to not modern day. but through the Roman Empire. And I think a little bit beyond that. I can't remember exactly what. Had a lot of history classes that I absolutely love.
Yeah, history's an interesting topic. That's kind of cool.
I remember that medieval history class segued very nicely into our trip to York.
Oh,
We I brought her with me to Amsterdam and we detoured through York on the way out because Megan wanted to see it. Yeah, I've
Oh,
been bringing Megan to. So I brought her. God, which one? I can't recall off the top of my head. No, I brought her to the inaugural one that we had at the hotel in
yeah,
Boulder.
right.
Yeah, so she came to that, and I believe two of the ones in Golden, including last summer, and then it just worked out. I was able to take her to the GDevCon Europe that was in Amsterdam. We were able to line that up. Another advantage to homeschooling is I get to be a part of. We get to have these kinds of experiences.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of people in the library community who do homeschooling. I know of several. So this may be of interest to a wider population of LabVIEW people. So in addition to all these other classes, you've taken some LabVIEW classes or training from your dad?
yeah. I've been through Core 1, Core 2, and Core 3 and the OO course.
Wow, that's
He's
pretty cool.
we're trying to find the time to get me through um the course
Actor
he
framework,
made, Actor
actor
Framework.
framework.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
But I the college classes I'm taking they're starting to build up.
Ah,
Maybe this summer we'll do it.
Maybe
Maybe
this
we'll take a
summer.
little time
so
just to
so
say
you're
we've done it.
taking classes from like a local community college as well to like
Yeah.
supplement everything? That's kind of cool. I remember I went to a public high school in Pennsylvania, but they had a thing with one of the local colleges and you could take some college classes. That's kind of cool.
That's
Yeah,
a that's a. Go ahead.
th there's an early college high school attached to the college, and we're not doing that because it's literally just a high school with college courses, not actually college.
Okay,
So,
cool.
There's
So
a lot of synergy between community college in Central Texas and the high schools. A lot of dual enrollment possibilities. A lot, and again, and Megan has said sometimes they are teaching their college level classes on high school campuses. My wife could go on because she does most of the homeschool administration, but apparently that's a big deal here in Central Texas.
it's common.
Is yeah, is to make that gateway as smooth as possible, that road as smooth as possible.
I just liked it because when I went to college, I had to take fewer of the like the general recs because I had a lot of them filled, which was nice.
That's yeah, show up with as many core classes, base level classes as possible. So I have the time to take the classes I want because architecture, you cannot actually speed up. The studio courses have to happen in a specific
Ah,
order and at a specific time, and you can't take shortcuts.
yeah. Engineering, electrical engineering at Pitt was very similar. They had like a cadence of courses, and you kind of had to take a lot of them in order.
Yeah,
But having all those prereqs out of the way meant that I could choose whatever I wanted for
the extra classes.
classes. So I took like judo and Gaelic. I took Gaelic and like a bunch of Spanish classes, and yeah, it was pretty interesting and fun.
I'm probably gonna wind up with a minor or double majoring in history.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, architecture and history seem like they would go together a little bit in that like architecture, I'm sure you study like ancient architectural patterns and things, and it's probably interesting to look at how architecture has changed over time and what has changed and what hasn't, because I'm sure like some of the basic architectural principles they figured out millions of years, or not millions, but thousands of years ago, however many years ago,
Hundreds,
still valid.
hundreds.
Hundreds, hundreds.
Yeah, it's only hundreds. Okay.
Well, oh, only hundreds, right? I
Uh,
mean, the
yeah.
medieval builders, cathedral builders, worked out a lot of the basics of building these larger structures, and they worked it out, made it up as they went along. Um,
But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, that was also a highlight of the York trip,
oh
York
yeah, there's
Minster,
a lot of
and
old
the
buildings.
dozens of mini churches just dotted all over the place.
Alan, did you go to the CLA summit in Madrid?
I did.
Yeah, yeah, there was a lot of cool architecture there. There was like a bunch of
Mhm.
cathedrals and there was some old Moorish walls that were still there from.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's old more stuff. I actually took a day trip out to Segovia after the conference, and I saw the Roman aqueduct, the 1700-year-old aqueduct that is still standing, which was just outstanding.
That's cool. Yeah,
So,
I went to Toledo and they had a bunch of old, very narrow streets. Like you
mhm,
barely fit a car in them, and that's interesting. It's interesting the mix of the old and new because you had all these tourists trying to walk and you had people trying to drive, and it was just kind of weird. But
mhm.
yeah, that was kind of cool. And talk about medieval history. Apparently, Toledo is very famous for swords and things like that. They had some,
If I ever get to Toledo, that's going to be an expensive trip
yeah.
because
They
Because you're going to
it'll be the
come
cost of
home
going
with three swords.
right, exactly. Oh, come on, you'll help me pick them out.
they were definitely
If I
selling.
get to go with you,
Oh, yeah,
Well, you,
there's
you
that.
should look into like the regulations because they definitely had like signs all over about all the regulations and like making sure like you could only purchase so many per person and like and there were big signs like don't take them on the subway, don't take them on the plane with you, etc. So
Just ship it
just
straight
ship them
home.
home.
yeah, that's about right.
It goes from the sword maker to the shipping depot and maybe beats you home from your trip.
So bringing it back around to LabVIEW a little bit because try to stay on
Yeah.
a little bit. What did you think of the LabVIEW courses, man? Like, did you find them challenging, the right level of challenge? Were they too easy? Um,
Sometimes they were a bit too easy. Sometimes I got way too lost because I wound up with some file issues because I walked in with little to no knowledge of how computers work.
Yeah, there's we've talked about this. It's something that we discovered as the instructor, and I sit down with students in a professional environment, a work environment, and they've been using computers in some capacity, and so there's a baseline knowledge of how your operating system behaves. That of course we can't reasonably expect NI to cover in like core one, but it was definitely oh we have to. I just take a step back and I have to help my I had three kids initially and I had to
One of them
um,
knew what he was doing.
mhm.
The two of us who didn't were kind of floundering for a bit
yeah.
while we tried to figure out how to not duplicate files and make sure everything lands in the right spot. I figured it out, but
Yeah, we definitely had to step back and assess because it was not, I mean, it was a blind spot for me as the instructor because, well, how do you not know how to move a file? Oh, because you've never done it.
Uh,
because I was what, 14?
Yeah, pretty much. And had never
well,
really done it before.
I know, Alan, you've probably taught enough NI classes that you won't be too surprised, but I definitely had one person in a class once that I don't think had ever touched a mouse before in his life. I don't know how. He was like he was older, but he was not that old, and I was he was having a lot of trouble following the directions, and yeah, it was
That
interesting.
is, I didn't have that until I worked with the kids.
Ah,
Um, but that's a level of newness
yeah. Well, it's
that I'm not
interesting
familiar
to
with.
think of how you could be like I would. It seems odd to me as an engineer that you can make it through, be a technical person and an engineering person, not have a basic understanding of how computers work. Like, I mean, you don't need to be an expert. Like, I don't know. It's interesting.
I was
Uh,
14.
Yeah.
yeah,
No. In
And
your
Owen
case, you're
was, my
totally
friend
fine.
was
We're not saying
14.
anything about you at all. I'm just.
well, I think maybe with an older, with a significantly, well, be a
Well,
little
maybe
harder nowadays, but an older student, I
you
have a
grew up
good friend
without,
of
yeah,
mine.
it's
I have
college.
a good friend of mine who did all of his. He did mechanical engineering stuff, and all of his stuff was he drew them. They were physical drawings that he did. You
Oh,
know,
well, you'll appreciate this. So, like 2007-ish, I got out of college and I had a job working at Westinghouse, and there was a guy there designing circuit boards. And in 2007, which is a while ago, but computers were like very well around and established, he was still laying out circuit boards by hand, like drawing traces with different colors with like overlays and laying them out and it was actually pretty amazing. And like he would lay out like people would try to lay out the boards like four-layer boards in the circuit software, and it would be like we can't do it, and he'd go and do it. And you could tell all of his too, actually, because they were neat and orderly and all the lines were straight. And like the auto router was just like routing them any which way to try to make it work. So his board
my
actually, I liked his boards because they were easy to track all the traces because they're all straight.
my friend, and my friend's my dad's age. Um, he firmly believed that you should not be allowed to touch AutoCAD until you had done a significant amount of work at a drafting board.
Yeah.
And I think it was for that reason. I think you learn a lot from manually manipulating the tools.
Yeah.
That that's also the stance that the college I'm considering takes on learning architecture. You're gonna learn how to do it paper and pencil before you touch the software.
Well,
And that's really funny because when I talk about doing documentation for software, I'm talking about doing the diagrams that we like to have, right? I'm a huge believer, and I've said this in presentations, I'm a huge believer in the number two pencil or mechanical pencil in my case. It's do
Fountain
your
pen.
thinking, fountain pen, do your thinking with, something that you don't think about anymore. I don't think about using a pencil. You don't think about using a fountain pen, right? That way you're thinking about the work and not the tool that you're using. I think there's a lot of value in that.
yeah. Well, anybody who's been through engineering school will probably know that like engineering, like they teach you everything the hard way first. I don't know if you remember this, but like you learn all these equations and all these equations, like, man, how am I ever going to remember this? And you get to the end of like, in 90% of cases, you can just use this assumption and assume it's all linear. And here's the simple equation. And like you use that 90% of the time going forward. But you need to know the limitations. And there are times when that equation doesn't work and you have to know how to do it the old way. And so find that interesting. The other interesting thing I think is this whole thing about AI taking over programming and stuff. And like, I mean, in the LabVIEW world, I don't think we have to worry about it immediately in the sense that like AI for LabVIEW is not coming anytime soon. I don't know. And I might disagree with me, but I don't buy all their hype. But
Hmm.
like I mean, I think we're gonna have to compete with text-based programmers using AI. But the thing I find interesting about AI is you need somebody like you need to have a basic knowledge because you tell AI like to write some code for you. And like what I've seen people do is like they write the test and they tell AI to fill in the code to pick the test pass, and that works. But like even if you're doing like unit tests, like say you tell AI to write a function, I don't know, that like squares numbers, right? And you give it 4 or 5 examples, you say, write some code that passes, and here's the test with the 4 or 5 examples. How do you know that that code actually works for every other
That it didn't just go and
and
like
make a
hardwire
lookup
the
table? Yeah,
solution.
exactly. And like, okay, for a squaring a number, that's easy one. But like, say you have some big complicated formula and you have 4 or 5 data points. So like, hey, make sure these 4 or 5 data points match. How do you know the other ones actually do? And like, you have to have some understanding of what it's doing. I don't know.
It's
Maybe that's,
not just tell it and it does it yet, and it might never be tell it what to do and it does it.
I mean, in some ways, I kind of compare it to like a calculator, right? Calculator makes math really easy. But if you don't know what numbers you're adding or why, or whether to add or subtract them or multiply them, like does it do you any good? I mean, I don't know.
I think we're going to wind up, we're going to do all this work on AI for writing software, and all we're going to wind up doing is writing the next level programming language because it's going to be the language you use to talk to the AI to generate the code. And
Yeah.
that's going to be its own language with its own set of disciplines and its own developer pipeline. And I mean, it's going to be like transitioning from, banging bits to, something like Python.
Well, I mean,
You
yeah, if
know,
you think about it now, right? Like we write code in LabVIEW, but what the output is the bits like that the
Mhm.
computer runs, right? So LabVIEW
Right.
is just like the interface to the bits. Why could that interface to the bits not be, hey, describe what you want? Like I get the pie in the sky, like it would be really awesome if you could do that. I mean,
It's just
we don't,
case measure button,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But I mean, I think we all know, right? Like we're not really good at specifying exactly what we want. And computers are like people who like if you imagine somebody taking everything you say 100% literally, right? I mean, maybe you've seen the video. There's a video of a guy trying to teach his kid about programming. And I don't know, the kid's like maybe 5, 6 years old, 10 years old. I don't know. He's like, okay, great. Tell me how to make a peanut butter sandwich. He's like, you take the bread and he grabs a loaf of bread. He's like, put the peanut butter on it. And he just sets a jar of peanut butter on top of the bread. He's like, no, 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 you got to take the bread out of the bag. So he takes the bread out, he bumps the bag out and puts the peanut butter on top. He's like, no, you got to open the jar. And like, you have to tell it like step by step by step exactly and be very literal. And, okay, AI can kind of interpret some of that, but like, how do what if it gets it wrong? And language is notoriously ambiguous. Like
Right.
the interesting one.
English is a horrible tool for specifying software.
Have you ever looked up Janus words? Do you know what Janus words are? It's an
Have you heard of Janice words, Megan? I haven't.
basically it's a word that means the same thing and the opposite at the same time.
Yeah, dust, chuffed. I've
Yeah.
heard of them. I haven't heard them referred to as Janus words, so that didn't trigger, but I've heard
Oh,
of them.
two-faced.
Yeah, yeah,
Two-faced.
yeah.
Yeah.
So basically like you could say like, hey, that's the bomb, and it means it's really great and awesome. Or you could say that guy bombed, and it's the same word. And in one case it has this positive notation, the other case it has the exact opposite notation. There are some that are even
I'm
like
so
more,
chuffed.
yeah,
Happy, angry.
yeah. Yeah, and so you have to rely on the context and you have to try to understand, and even in the same context, like, you know, yeah, so it's very interesting.
All the multiple meanings in use of a certain four-letter Anglo-Saxon word that starts with F.
Well, and also too, there are certain words, right, that like, okay, like text to speech stuff, right? There are certain words that sound exactly the same. The color red, the word read, READ, like he read the book, like, there, and depending on the sentence, like there could be some sentences where both meanings might make at least grammatical sense. And
But
so,
what's the famous sentence? Buffalo, 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 which is a correctly structured, correct, meaningful sentence in English,
oh yeah,
and relies on the multiple definitions of the word buffalo. And you can do the same thing with police or a couple other words that do that.
yeah,
Which strays a bit far from what it's like to, learn laughing from your dad. But
Yeah.
these are what conversations with Sam are like. They kind of wander all over the map,
yeah.
Oh,
which is
I
fun.
was questioning how we got to LabVIEW and AI 4 minutes
Oh,
ago.
that's a and I showed off at
No,
Family Point
I knew
yesterday.
how, but it was like,
Yeah,
Oh, so
and
I do that
and
line
we
in
and
my head. When I go back and listen to it, I might be like, wow, I was like way off. And
I'll bet Sam was looking at the thread on the Champions Forum about AI sometime in the last 24 hours.
oh, actually,
probably.
oh yeah, well, I think I did post something on there. So yeah,
Right. So it's on his mind at the moment, which is not surprising.
yeah,
AI is going to take our jobs.
yeah,
Steve
yeah,
Watts post on it.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know that it's necessarily going to take our jobs, but somebody who's really good with AI might. I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think you're going to hire a person. I don't think you're going to hire an AI, but I do think it is like. I think it's kind of a tool like a calculator, right? Like if you're hiring two people to do accounting for you and one knows how to use a calculator and one doesn't, the guy with the
Yeah.
calculator is going to be way more like it's not to say that the person without the calculator can't do all the math and figure it all out and calculate in their head and write it down or how, do long division or whatever by writing it out, but the calculator guy is going to be way more efficient. But in both cases, you still need the knowledge of what numbers to add and subtract and if you're an accountant,
Right.
what categories to put things in and all of that. So it's very interesting. The most interesting part of that is the sociological part of like programmers have been automating people's jobs for decades, and now they're worried about their own job getting automated, which is seems kind of ironic to me.
I'm not concerned. 20 years ago, I had a relative look at me and, he asked, if I was looking forward to seeing my job get outsourced to India. And, here are 20 years later, and Soliton is still doing solid work and I'm still making money. So,
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I think in our line of work, there's definitely value, particularly since we work with hardware, of having somebody local and on site that can come and visit. Like, you do test and measurement stuff. You can hire some of the software stuff out to India, but at some point, if you need somebody on site, are you going to fly somebody from India all the way over here? Probably not.
well, and you have the same problem that we have with the AIs. I have to, when I'm working with somebody overseas, we have to be really explicit about what we want done, and there's going to be iteration on that, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean India, there's the communication challenge, there's accents and stuff, but there's also like just the time
12
difference.
hour time difference.
The time difference is like the big one, right? Like I'm working
Right.
with a company in India right now, and like we meet for like an hour every day, but it's like there's only like an hour or two of overlap, and it's like late at my time, early their time, and like it manages to work. But now there are advantages to that though too, in that you know you can have somebody in the U.S. working all day, and you can hand it off at the end of the day and give it to somebody in India and have them work all night, and if things go
I've had
well,
that
it
experience.
could go well.
I, I've had that experience. I worked at a job that took me to Japan for a little bit. And when we were working with our Japanese counterparts, or when we would go visit and working with our folks back in the States, you would you would finish the day on a bug that you know how to solve, and you would kick it over to the team, the overseas team. And when you came into work the next morning, the problem had been solved for you.
Yeah.
And as far as you were concerned, that happened in zero time because you slept while somebody spent 4 or 5 hours working it out.
But to that communication thing, you still have to, like, when you do that handoff, you have to be really good at communicating with each other.
Which
And
goes back to what you're saying about AI, is you have to be
yeah,
really good at laying out what you want. So
yeah. How often do customers actually know what they want when they come? Have you, so taking your classes and stuff, did you run into, like, I guess classes, how can they simulate that, like the customer not knowing what they want? Do you just like change the requirements partway through the exercise and be like, okay, now they change?
no, but I
No,
might
that
do
would be
that.
cruel.
It would be
But that is what
realistic though.
happens, right?
It would be realistic, but that's
Yeah, we should teach you how to respond to the challenge in front of you before we change that challenge midstream.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I guess, yeah, there's like two challenges to programming, right? I guess the first one is just making the computer do what you want, and then there's making the computer do it in a way that's easy to change and modify, and you kind of have to figure the one out first.
Right. Which isn't currently core one, core two. I don't know, Megan. What was your impression from core one, core two, core three of how well you were prepared for, oh, we have to make a change now. That's more
I
toward
was
the end of the
decent.
series.
I would not core one, core two, midway core through core two. I really wasn't prepared because I didn't know how to pivot as well. But end of core two, most of core three, I knew. Oh, you're saying this. This is what you probably want. I'm gonna do this, and if it doesn't work, I'll try
Try
or
something else.
some variation of that. I started I started learning LabVIEW shortly after I actually got my own computer. That's how that, yeah.
Yeah. So you're still learning how to use computers in general. So,
Yeah, I was still learning how to move files around and make it do what I wanted to without the added coding.
yep. Yeah, I think part of it too is in order to be able to pivot, you need to know what's possible. So you need to have like some experience of like, you know, and also like just experience of like what might somebody ask for? Like they generally, they ask for this, but what else typically goes along with this? Oh,
Yeah,
they want to store the data in a file. Okay, great. If you don't know anything, you just like dump the data in a file, but you don't know to ask about like, well, what file format and what are you going to use it for? And like, what if you end up with way too much data? How do you handle that? And like,
yeah,
there's a lot
there's
of
you
questions.
don't know enough about the language and you don't know enough about people as customers to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's especially early on in the core 1, core 2, core 3 pipeline.
Yeah. Like,
Which makes sense. That's not the purpose of those classes.
No, it's not.
Now I'm hoping, Megan overhears my conversation. Yeah, I work at home. My daughter homeschools. She hears my conversations about working with customers all the time. And that's not, I mean, that's didn't necessarily, there's not necessarily a plan to loop her in, but that's not accidental. I mean, I exposed her to a lot of what it means to work with customers. That's
yeah.
one of the things that I thought was really cool. We don't have a real tradition anymore of bringing our children in to work with us
Yeah.
because most of modern life doesn't really permit that. But I had the opportunity to do that, and it was one of the reasons I was really excited when I had a project. I finally got Megan to the point where she had enough skills, and it's like, oh, I have a project she can work on this summer, and it's an actual thing we put out the community, and I was really really excited to make that opportunity for her because it's something that not a lot of parents get to do these days.
It paid for my suit. The money for
It
that paid
did.
for my suit.
It did. It
Oh,
did.
yeah. Cool.
So yeah, what was it like from your perspective going from work, the core one, core two, three, which is not like a normal, like one of your classes, right? There wasn't a grade, there wasn't tests. We just worked through the slides and you guys did the assignments. But what was it like stepping in and doing that project with me?
At that point, I had been away enough from LabVIEW that I was I was refamiliarizing myself with the material. Um, I was, and I got better at it as I went along. I got more confident. I could actually do more steps before calling in my dad for help.
I think
But
that's most interns, right?
initially I was, Dad.
We did. There was a fair amount of I'm going to come and explain this to you, and then you're going to put it together, and that's certainly a true statement.
But I once I got comfortable, it was good.
You know. So what was it like to? I know I haven't checked. I haven't checked lately. Maybe I'll go look. And I think it's really cool. It's always cool to like, hey, here's this cool thing that I did just because I thought it should be done, and it's something like 293 as of today.
There you go.
293
Damn.
downloads for the active hierarchy inspector.
Yeah, yeah. It's always nice to look at those numbers and be like, "Ooh, like somebody else actually found this useful."
Mhm.
So,
But yeah, yay.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
didn't
pretty
do all that
cool.
work for nothing.
I think
No,
those
you
are.
didn't.
I think those are also good opportunities for interns or bringing new people in. Is like building these little tiny community tools that like just do some little like it's useful, but it's not something that you're selling. It's not part of a product or anything. So like they can take their time. There's no pressure. Those are
It's
nice.
hard to sell the services of a high school student
Yeah,
to one of my customers without being able to point to a body of work that they've done. But at
yeah.
the same time, you don't want to just be, I'm writing random stuff and you don't want to take advantage of free labor basically to do things. So we actually sat down, we did the whole thing. I mean, we filled out all the necessary paperwork, which for a minor working on their parents' business in the state of Texas and not making a whole lot of money is actually almost non-existent. But, she's an official employee. I have the paperwork for it.
Oh,
And she's going to be, filling out her tax form here in the not too distant future. So we were able to make that a whole package part of was like all just that one little project. And there's like it's a long list of things that we can point to and say we met this educational need
yeah.
by doing this project.
So I have a question. Did you guys do any pair programming and how did that work? Like, was there too much of like a dynamic there to like, have your dad sitting looking over your shoulder or vice versa? Or was it just
It was a lot more instructorly than pair programming.
okay?
He would he would present the problem. I would say, would it be a, I would present an idea to fix that problem. He would tell me whether or not that was a smart idea. I actually got ahead of him at one point. I can't remember which thing, but
Oh yeah, right. What was
I
that?
I I got I actually found a better solution than what he did. I am not letting that go.
No, you shouldn't. There's multiple ways in software to solve a problem, and I mean, I'm not ashamed. There's no shame in that. There's actually pride in that. You found a better way to do something. Look what I did. I mean, somebody who in this instance was smarter than me. That's as much to my credit as is to yours. Um, what was it? It was some little
It was so small,
a
but you were
little a
like,
little data manipulation thing, and
yeah.
I had a way to do it in my head that had been the
And
way
then
I'd
he
done that sort of
presented
thing
it to me,
forever.
and
Yep.
I went, well, why not just do this
Yeah,
thing that's actually in LabVIEW?
yeah,
And it's like, well, you wouldn't do that if you were not trying to be smart.
yeah,
So let's do that because that's smart.
yeah. Well, I think we get tunnel vision.
Yep. Yes,
You actually had to think through it.
I did. I did because it was so not what I expected.
That wouldn't work. Oh, wait, no, actually it would.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
also too, sometimes asking beginners, like I've noticed like LabVIEW adds features and us old timers don't notice because you skip the what's new in LabVIEW class or something and you do something the old way and somebody's like, hey, why don't you just do this? This is easier. And you're like, oh,
What's
Here's
new
his
in
elegant
LabVIEW?
solution.
nah,
What's new in LabVIEW hits like the major marketing highlights. Doesn't hit all those little things. I had not, true story, I had not taught the core series prior to teaching it to my daughter's homeschool pod
So he was learning
because
things.
because up until right around that time they didn't pay enough for the beginner classes to be worth taking away from consulting work. They changed that a few years back, which is good, but I had never taught Core 1, Core 2. And I sat down with these kids and I went through these, and every now and again, I'd be like, I didn't look too closely at the slides. Like I know the material in here, and so we put the slides up and we're going through, and I'm like looking at the slide, I'm like, LabVIEW does that. When did LabVIEW add that? Oh, that's cool. And it's like, and now it's like, yeah, I need to go teach the core classes once in a while, at least once every time they update the course, just to
Well,
make myself look at it.
if you want to feel really old, then you look at when they introduced it and you realize it's been there since like LabVIEW 2009 or something. You never noticed. You're like,
Right?
oh, okay.
Ah,
You're like,
yeah.
and then you're like, yeah, I remember when that actually wasn't there too.
So the whole like you can mouse over the pull down on a case structure, and
Yep.
you can rotate your mouse wheel and it'll step through the cases.
Yep.
I found that out just in time for them to take it away from me because now we have Zoom.
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna say. Well, the one that shocked me was the format into string. Like if you double click on it, it opens up a dialog window and lets you like you don't have to remember all the codes. You can like press
Thank,
button.
thank, thank you, Sam. I learned something today.
Yeah, yeah. I, I mean, somebody. I don't even think I was teaching Core 1 and somebody like double clicked on it and pulled up this window and I was like looking by. I was like, what the heck is that window? Like I didn't even like how I didn't even catch it in the slides.
Huh?
Do that?
Huh?
This is I have maintained for a couple of decades now, more than a couple of decades now, and I'm far from alone on this. Every single one of us who has any sort of capability to do so should teach what we know as soon as we can. It cements your own knowledge, and it keeps you in contact with the people who are coming up behind you, from whom you can learn things because it's a fresh set of eyes.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question, Alan. What was the biggest thing you learned from teaching the class?
Oh, the biggest thing that I learned, well, I learned a bunch of things. I learned a lot of little things about LabVIEW, of course. Um, but there was definitely, I think probably the biggest, and it's kind of a meta lesson rather than point at like a specific thing. But sort of the meta lesson was when we kind of alluded to this already, is we do build up these blind spots to anybody, and other people in other fields that I know. You do certain things a certain way for so long, and you become blind to things like mining students may not necessarily understand file operations
Hmm.
in their operating system, and that's a real barrier to instruction.
I
Okay,
still
because
don't
they're
entirely know how they work.
it could be a little esoteric. Yeah, but I mean, you got to go back and assess that. So there were several lessons. There was that one. There was the blinders that can come up. There's the what do you do when you are working through, because I was like, oh, I know Core 1 computer. I'm just going to go through the slides, right? And then I run into this issue where it's like my student is struggling. What is with the content that they don't understand? Well, it wasn't the content. It was it was something unrelated to the content that was a barrier. So what can I do as an instructor to remove those barriers? So there were a lot of, I'm a better instructor for having had this experience because I'm aware now of not so much of all my blind spots, but the fact that I'm going to have them. And the
Ah,
fact that when a student comes up with a why am I struggling with this, you need to step back and look at the whole picture of the student situation, which is not something you're older gentlemen without a lot of experience and not being comfortable with this mouse. Like it
yeah,
wouldn't occur to you until wouldn't have occurred to me at this point in 2024 until you've mentioned it. But yeah, we might run into that person
yeah,
or something similar.
yeah. I think it said to like right click on something. He's like, what do you mean right click? And I was like, man, I don't know.
Right? And then you have to explain it. And then you're like, you just go like this and like, well, what is that? Oh, you
Yeah,
figure out
there's
how to articulate this.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then you want to articulate without making the guy feel like an idiot either for like asking, right?
Mhm,
So how do you do
mhm.
that tactfully?
Yeah.
Which is yeah, the hardest challenges are always people. So like, interact with people and
Feel that.
trying to maintain patience and empathy and all those things.
A
Some
little
people
humility,
some
some
people that
grace.
comes naturally. I try. I struggle with
I
the
don't think it comes naturally to any of us. I think some people have just gotten farther along the learning curve,
yeah, yeah.
and they may have started a lot earlier, so it's smoother for them.
Yeah.
These are all learnable skills. Just
They very much
practice.
are, yeah.
Yeah.
But I also feel like too they're perishable skills in the sense that if you don't practice them a lot, you don't necessarily keep up with them. They're like muscles; you have to exercise them.
I have discovered this. It's, working from home and remote with my customers, it's difficult. My daughter is I worried a bit homeschooling her daughter. It's like, is she getting enough, general contact? And then I sat back and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, she's taking these college classes. She's running off and running around the ACC campus and we need fellow students that way. And the online support for these classes, she's doing discussion groups online and stuff. So it's like, yeah, she's getting out and
Less
practicing
discussion
the soft
groups,
skills.
no, less discussion groups online, but I've got people I eat lunch with on campus, and I've got a couple of close friends who I mainly communicate with online, but sometimes
Mhm.
we get together in person, and I'm
Yeah, I think
learning a
you get
lot.
out you get out more than I do these days. In
Yeah.
all honesty. Yeah. I deal with most of my customers online these days.
I was gonna say, yeah, I don't know if you've noticed that shift, but definitely, like, I think it may have started before the pandemic, but definitely since the pandemic, like, I've definitely noticed a lot more remote work and a lot less, which, which has its advantages, right? I mean, I like working for a company in, California or something and not having to go there, to quote your favorite state, but
Yeah.
I'm doing stuff for other, I'm working with this team in India, and that's great, and I don't have to go there either. Um, but
I I
yeah,
I I I miss some of the travel that I did prior to the pandemic. But I certainly don't miss running up to and my Wisconsin customers, fabulous, great people, and it's in Madison. It's a delightful little Midwest city, and I don't need to be going to a city that far away once a month for a week for 2 years. That was really tiring, and I don't
well,
need to do that anymore.
I miss a lot like the casual conversation, like over lunch or while you're
Yep.
sitting there waiting for something to load or whatever. Like kind of like the conversation we had at the beginning of this podcast episode. It's
Yeah,
like
right.
things that like are interesting, but maybe not part of your like normal day-to-day work. And like I feel like you miss a lot of those conversations. And
And
you,
that's been a lot of the benefit of GDevCons.
Mhm.
Both of them. It's why I come to yours. It's why I go to the one in Europe. Is it's one thing to read something that Jurg posts online or Steve Watts posts online, and it's
It's
entirely different
another to
to
see it.
yeah to go see it, to sit with them, in a pub somewhere and be having the conversations. So what'd you feel about being up on stage for a presentation, Megan? How did that go for you?
The dance training is, and the fact that I had a similar presentation about a week prior didn't faze me. I mean, I was a little nervous because first, like professional presentation, but nothing, nothing too bad.
Yeah, all these folks that you've been hanging out with is the kid in the room, and then you're up on the stage showing them something.
Yeah. Oh God,
Yeah.
yeah.
Something
That's
cool.
That was a little, oh, yes. Even though I am 16, I am not incompetent.
It
It's always my age is always a surprise in that room.
is. It is true story. I
Never
think
not a surprise.
I think my favorite moment from that was for our listeners who weren't there, we had a my computer for whatever reason would not talk to the presentation hardware in the room, wouldn't talk to the projector. And so we were supposed to go first in 7x7, and that didn't work out. So I had to go borrow, I think it was might have been Kevin's computer, I borrowed somebody's computer. And we moved everything over to that computer because it was just LabVIEW and a LabVIEW demo. And
You didn't manage to close it all down.
right. Well, I did a test. I tested, after the hierarchy inspector, for those of you who haven't looked at it yet, and you can find it on VIPM.io. Run your active framework application, run the hierarchy inspector, and it will give you a tree view of the entire hierarchy of your actors. And I ran our test scenario, our demonstration, to prove that everything was working. And when I stopped it, there was one actor that was lingering. And we had a spot in the demo, but 2 minutes into the demo where Megan was supposed to see, we've launched all our actors and we shut them down, and this guy didn't shut down. Oh, look, here's how I can do this. And
That
you know,
was the first thing that happened.
we're up on the stage, right? So tell them what happened, because that's your story.
We pulled it up, and there was this orphan actor, and I'm like,
Now she stared at me, she stared at the audience, you know, there's the briefest of pauses, and I'm like, you're gonna show them that feature anyway, kid. Just show it to them now.
and I did, but it was a moment of, really, Dad? Really?
Oh, that is Murphy's Law of presentations of demonstrations. They never go well.
Yeah,
Well, they can go well. They never go the way you expect. There's always something that's going to be a little off.
yeah, you got to be able to think on your feet very quickly to do it. Like you need to practice a lot. You need to be really familiar with it, and you need to like be able to think on your feet. I've given a lot. I've gone over to doing fab style where like you pre-record things and
Yeah,
through them.
yeah,
Because also too, like depending on what you're demoing, a lot of demos there's a lot of setup, and it takes a bunch of clicks to do something. It's like yeah, just show a slide and
right, right. It's why I don't. It's actually why I don't. If I'm going to show you code in a slide presentation, I don't open up code in LabVIEW,
yeah.
because navigating through the sewer, I will show you a picture of the code. But Megan, how many times do you recall how many times we actually ran that demo in the hotel room and stuff before we did it?
I
About
want to
half a
say
dozen.
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's about 5 or 6 times.
yeah.
Wasn't a
So
whole
you
lot.
roll, so you rolled with it. You were just the tiniest bit flustered, just the tiniest bit. But then you just rolled with it. We finished out the demo. It's like, yeah, but there we go. That's cool. That's my
Honestly,
kid.
though, doing live demos though and things like that are actually probably not a bad thing because if you can do it there and handle it, then when you do it in front of a customer, because like customers, you can't do like customers don't like seeing the slides. They want to see the actual code. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
There's a time for slides to the customer, and there's a time that's showing them how the code works.
yeah, yeah,
And they definitely want to, because slides can be faked. In front of like a GDevCon audience, I can stand up and show you a slide of the code, and if I say this is the code that works, you'll believe me on the strength of my reputation.
yeah,
But
yeah.
as a customer, customer should not simply believe my slide presentation.
No, yeah, I'm a big believer when it comes to customers. Like, don't tell me the code works. Show me. Like, even
Mhm.
like when I come in and like, they're like, oh, we have this system that does X, Y, Z, and we just want you out of this feature. Okay, well, let's see the system actually work first. Because
So speaking of proving it, we did one thing in the hierarchy inspector. I made Megan do unit tests.
aha, I like it.
Tell us what you thought of that. And I did it.
Tedious
Sadly,
but
sadly, I
important.
did it. Sadly, I did it in VI Tester. I should have done it in Karaya, but VI Tester was what I knew at the time. So, go. You were saying, Megan?
Tedious and annoying, but important
Okay.
was
That,
was
that's
my impression.
that's actually not a bad thing though. Like realizing the importance. I feel like unit testing is one of those things that until it catches a bug for you, you don't realize how important it is. And then you make a little mistake and you're like, oh, it caught it. And I wouldn't have caught that otherwise. Oh, that's useful. But yeah,
Or after your 700th unit test, when you're doing regression testing and you find that you broke something in a part of the code where you didn't expect it, or you didn't quite. I've had it come up a few times where I didn't quite finish a change.
yeah, you got it all and you missed one tiny spot and it caught it. That's
Right. And the unit
otherwise you
test
might
caught.
assume you were done. Yeah.
Yep.
I what I noticed, I did that the other day. I was working on a project and I made this big change, and like 2 minutes into the change, I was like, "Oh, this is a really big change. I should have like taken smaller steps." So I was like, "You know what?" I was like, "I've got unit tests. Let me see if I can."
Let's
I got
see.
done and it like caught one thing, and I was like, "Okay, good." And then
I didn't completely screw it up.
and the unit test like pointed me to exactly what was wrong. I fixed it, done, and it ran. I was like, "Okay, that
Yeah.
was." Yeah, but
Yeah.
that was one of those ones where you check in, it's like, 100 VIs changing. Like, whoa. But like,
Yeah.
it's like
Or
changing a type def or something, right? And it's like everywhere, and it's like you can't avoid, or it's
right.
hard to avoid changing all of them. I'm sure
Well,
there's
and it's
techniques.
nice after a merge, right? I just did
Yeah,
a merge on a customer repo, a couple of different features, a couple of different disparate features that I had to pull together, and did the merge, ran the unit test. And this is, I think, when I find that I've made a change somewhere and I've broken something somewhere else, my code modularity is good enough that it's very rare that this other piece of code all the way across the application doesn't run correctly. But what I'll often find is the unit test won't run because it's broken,
yeah.
because I didn't do all of my cleanup. And I
Ah,
caught a bunch of those yesterday. It's like, oh yeah, I think I fixed that and that. So,
that's
but
cool.
yeah, I made her do the whole package. We sat down, we laid out the feature. She had to do the unit test before she could write the code. Then she got to write the code. Uh, Trying to give her a little microcosm of a complete workflow. I mean, we don't have a. I mean, especially I currently am not doing any CI/CD
Mhm.
on my project, so I don't have any of that set up. And certainly for something this size, we wouldn't bother. But she did all the pieces, and there were check-ins to source code control,
That was
and
gonna be my question. Did you teach her how to use Get, or I mean, you probably just taught her the bare minimum, right?
we started with your class. Actually, she
Oh,
watched a little of that, and then I think we got to the point where we weren't making the gains we needed to make, and so I showed her a few more things. What did you think of working with Git, kiddo? Kiddo, she's 16.
she'll always be kiddo, but
She'll always be kiddo. She'll be 35 with
kiddo to
like
you. Yeah.
her own kids, maybe, and I'll be calling her kiddo.
Um, can definitely see how um Git and source tree are useful, especially when you're in two different cities.
Yep.
Um, but and I'm probably gonna have to relearn how to use it if I'm gonna do another project.
Mhm. No doubt. You're in
So,
the land of having entry level experience multiple times, which is
Yeah.
okay.
honestly, though, I wouldn't be surprised if Get was useful as an architect, having drawings and things. I could see that. I mean, honestly, I could see the ideas behind source code control being useful all over. I guess the
Yeah.
question is somebody who's in an office typing in Word docs, right? They're probably not going to learn Get. But if you are a programmer, and you know how to use Get, like using it to manage Word docs and stuff like that is totally legitimate. Like,
I worked one of the partners that I worked with San Diego National Labs, and I mean, a large part of our work product was documents, and it was entertaining listening to the technical writers talking about who had. It was the exact same thing we see with VIs for people who aren't using source control. Who has the current version of the document and who has the latest, and have these changes been integrated, and we just, I mean, and this wasn't original to me. Somebody else told this to me, but in my group, it's like, hey, the docs go into source code control,
mhm. Yeah, teach them
and
how to commit
yeah,
and just
yeah,
have to commit it to source code control. Yeah.
yeah, and that saves you from things like your customer coming back and they give you Rev E of the document and you bid on Rev E, and then they come walking in with Rev H pointing to Rev H and saying this thing is here and you're supposed to do that, and you can go to your source code control and you pull up this is the version we bid against and your item is not there, so pay us more money.
Yeah.
Saves you from things like that.
Very cool. So we're coming up close to an hour, so let's try and wrap things up a little bit. But there are a couple things that we should talk about, and I want to hear about the CLD Success Pack, and then I also want to hear a little bit about some of your thoughts, Alan and Megan, if you have some on things that NI could potentially improve on as far as like onboarding new people and where some of the gaps are.
Um,
So let me introduce the success pack, Megan, and just tell them where I got it. And then I think we'd like mostly to hear from you about what it was like working on them. So the CLD success pack is not something that you can find it online, and we might want to find that link to go with the podcast. I'll see if I can track it down. Well, one of us should see if we can track it down. Um, and it's what it is. It's a collection of 18 exercises that start off very small, and a lot of the original ones were, I think, dealing with timestamps and stuff. But at the end, has you writing something very close to a complete CLD exam, and they are open ended. NI gives you the bare bones. Here's your front panel block diagram with nothing on it, and then here's a solution. But unlike Core One, Core Two, Core Three, there are no steps. So it's an open ended homework assignment. And we had done Core One, Core Two, Core Three. We were looking for a little something to do. We weren't ready for the OO course. And I found that. And so that was one of our semesters of just, we'll get together for an hour and a half every week and we'll work these as a group. Probably closest to pair programming. I actually made them pair program for that, going back to one of your early questions. And so that's the intro. And So I'll hand it
Before
over
we
to
get on to
Megan to talk
Megan's
about.
answer really quickly, though, I very much am interested in seeing that because I've been looking for exercises to give people to practice LabVIEW stuff like in the workshops, and it's kind of
Mhm.
hard to come up with your own exercises, but
Oh
if
yeah.
you made, that would be really nice. So,
Yeah, the success package, honestly, more enjoyable than the courses for me.
is that
The
just because it was more mo open-ended?
it wasn't a okay, do this and then do this and then do this. It was a how do you get from here to here with these things? It
Ah,
was more puzzle-esque than the courses really are.
Mhm.
yeah, that is kind of one complaint about the LabVIEW courses, the core courses that I have, is that they're very like rubric, like follow. They're very handholdy, like these are the set of steps, and they don't really teach you how to think.
Initially, that's really that do this, then do this, then do this is really helpful when you're initially teaching the thing. I can't remember if they transitioned to more open-ended near the end of core three, but I don't think they did.
None of them, not even my class, not even the
Yeah.
active framework class,
Yeah,
does
there's
that.
it's still very handholdy, and I really appreciated having the puzzle aspect, the how to solve the solving the problem over follow the instructions. And
Yeah,
yeah, more
Mm.
things on what and I could do is cut down on the instruction as the courses go on.
On the rubric, the cookie cutter
Yeah.
stuff, more open-ended exercises. I'm inclined to agree. I don't know. I don't know in the context of, and they were really good.
Yeah.
Because I sat with them. I sat with my two students. So two students, Megan and her close friend of hers, for those exercises and worked with them. So I would give suggestions, or I think at one point they really needed a functional global, which is no longer covered anywhere in the core courses because they're trying to get away from that. So it's like, well, what is a functional global? How does it work? Okay, here's a place where they need a piece that they don't have. It's not covered anywhere. So I, as the instructor, stepped in and let me show you how to this technique, and then is this something that you can use? So that was kind of the pattern. We also did. I had them pair program. So one session, Megan would be on the keyboard, and her friend would be, do this, do that. Let's put this place, and then we flip it around. What did you
That
think of that, Megan?
I there is a significant level of trust between the person at the keyboard and the person giving the instructions. And I don't know if I would have been as successful pair programming with someone I didn't know as well. But that's me.
I think it's a fair criticism.
yeah.
Um, Also part of the reason we were pair programming is we had one computer between the two of us. So it was a necessity and we just turned it into a training opportunity, which was good.
Yeah. So one thought I'm having, Alan, is you mentioned the functional global variables and them not teaching it, and kind of in some ways I'm okay with that because like you want to encourage people to use a more modern way of doing things, but I feel like dealing with legacy code is something that the NI training really falls down on in the sense that like, you know, sometimes you inherit a job and it is just, hey, we've got this problem, let's start from scratch and build this thing. But often it's a rescue project or it's like, hey, we have this thing that works and we need to make a couple changes to it. And like if you don't know about functional global variables, when you inherit some legacy code that's using them all over, that's gonna be a big shock.
Oh yeah. Well, and again, some of these corner case techniques. I mean, functional globals have become more and more and more and more corner case as the years have gone by, to the point where I can't remember the last time I wrote one from scratch. And there's a functional global buried down inside the active framework
Yep.
because sometimes that's just how you solve a problem every
Yeah.
now and again.
They are.
And useful tricks, useful corner case things that we hadn't thought of before. Give me an hour by myself, I'm sure I'll think of a half a dozen other ones. But they're the more recent core classes have really de-emphasize the queued message handler, de-emphasize them as they're doing channel wires instead. And as you say, there's a bunch of legacy queued message handler code out there.
My
And
dad actually made us learn how to use queued message handlers.
I did. I
Yeah.
did. Because for whatever reason, you may not have access to a framework and you may have to do your own. And all of our current frameworks are variants on cute message handling.
Yep.
So why do we not, we might teach that and say now there are frameworks that do this better, but I think the core concepts may be a little easier to explain. What did you think of the cute message handling, Megan, as a
I could
structure?
use both. Honestly, I could use both and not either or not and not really care. I
Cute message handler versus what's your second one?
the channel wires.
Channel wires. Yeah.
Yeah. I could use
Okay.
both or one or the other or switch between them and not really have an issue.
Well, and there you go. I think that would actually be the reason to teach both and comfort with both, because there are concepts that you don't that you may not be able to articulate them, but the concepts of moving data between these message handlers and then sort of intellectually logically what's going on with them, and it doesn't matter which
Yeah.
structure you're actually using, which is the way it should be.
Well, you're probably, yeah. In that way, you're a better programmer than me because I will out myself as a crusty old curmudgeon. I don't. I've never used a channel wire.
I've never used them
I've
either.
I've never inherited any code that's used channel wires either. I have seen some legacy code. A guy came in and showed me some code and asked for my advice, and he was using channel wires everywhere, and I was like, I was actually kind of lost. I was like, it struck me as odd. So,
They have a a deal breaking barrier for me, which is that you can't instantiate a channel wire at one time.
ah,
That they have to be defined. They have to be all defined originally. And I've gotten very used to having actors that go away.
ah.
I leverage having actors that go away or start up from scratch.
I think we
And
should probably do that more in LabVIEW because it
mhm,
is like a limiting thing to have to know all of your loops up front, and being able to launch stuff and instantiate dynamically is quite a
yeah.
useful thing in a lot of cases.
If my UI isn't running, if I'm not looking at my UI, why do I have it running?
Yeah, lots of times people have stuff running in the background that's not really doing anything, and
Yeah.
it's
But
chewing
we
out.
digress. We
Anyway,
digress. This is
yeah,
what architects
that's
argue
way
about.
too. So, any closing remarks?
One of the things that is a real barrier, because you asked me about this, Sam, one of the things I think that NI has created a barrier is it is difficult and expensive to get into a LabVIEW course these days if you are not if you're not in an enterprise agreement with engineering training credits. We actually sat down to when I set up the first Core One class, my thought was, oh, I'll order the manuals for them, and so the kids will have their manuals, and I'll get them as an alliance partner, which I get a steep discount on materials, and that steep discount came out to be like 150, $175 per student. Uh, and I couldn't get them to work a deal. And I mean, I was just flabbergasted. That's crazy. I wound up teaching the class anyway. As I said, I hadn't taught the core series before, so I figured NI couldn't fault me for practicing the slides in front of an audience.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like that's I understand they're trying to get to some level of profitability, but I don't think that's the angle they want to do it in. They really need to be getting this content out as best they can. And that's actually why the community training initiative is kind of exciting for me. And I'm trying to, of course, I have a long list of side projects I work on, but on that list is a do some actor framework modules for the CTI, because if we really want to maintain and grow our community, folks like Megan need to be able to get involved. And Megan's going to do something else. She doesn't want to write code for a living. She's going to go build buildings. Um,
Yeah.
but if the classes are expensive, if the materials are expensive, then it becomes a barrier for her to try that and
Hmm.
see if
And
it fits.
learn. It
Hmm.
Yeah.
becomes a barrier. If I honestly, I hadn't started coding as early as I did, I probably would have gone to college for computer science and gone, oh, I don't enjoy this as much as I do, and have been lost. I wouldn't have gotten to architecture as quickly and as and with and I would have spent a whole lot of money on the way.
Right.
Whole lot of
And
unnecessary money.
it's why Python is enjoying the success it does is Python is free.
S-
And we have to charge money for, the LabVIEW IDE to maintain it and build it. And I appreciate that. And we need to find avenues to get instruction, good instruction. I can't remember her name, but she was on the 24th episode of first season of the podcast. She works for Milwaukee Tool. I
Beth.
have her Beth. Yes, thank you. Yes. She was talking about, her getting engineers in. They've had the 1 week of LabVIEW in college and it was terrible.
Yeah.
Right. How are we supposed to grow the community if that's their big initial experience. If we can't put it in front of them as something to play with, like try this out in your homeschool or try this out in a high school classroom and see if this is something you might want to pursue as a career.
Yeah. No, so I'm reminded as you were saying, Megan, about like trying things out and learning early. I think that really ties into software development, right? The whole agile idea of like try things and see what works, and if it doesn't work, then find something else. So I'm curious if you have any last words, Megan, on why you chose architecture. I thought it was very interesting, our conversation that
Well,
we had when we were planning.
it's there isn't that much of a difference between LabVIEW and architecture. Architecture is a lot more physical.
Hmm.
It's a lot more um, draw the thing, build the model of the thing, or render the model of the thing, send it off to an engineering company, have them finish the project that you started. It's that I do the creative part. It's a lot more creative. And I do better when I can do when I have that balance between science and math and art. I need that balance, and I wasn't finding it in coding in LabVIEW.
Well, I think a lot of LabVIEW programmers probably I identify with that because like there's a reason I'm not a database or website programmer, right? Because I need to see something tangible. In LabVIEW, to your point, like yes, writing the code is not necessarily tangible, but like it can touch things in the real world and you can interact with real hardware and stuff.
But yeah, you click your mouse and
A motor.
and a piece of equipment moves from here to here, and then a light turns on because now you're where you're supposed to be, and that's like I'm a wizard. I did magic.
Yeah.
It's the most awesome feeling.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but it's not the same feeling
Mm-mm.
as seeing as drawing and sketching something that comes from completely from your head and then build and physically building the model
yep.
and then going out in the real world and seeing your building
And then walking into it one
and
day.
walking in it and experiencing it in person in the physical world. It's not, it
Yeah.
doesn't hit the same.
Yeah. I think you're just taking like my idea of like, I need to interact with the real world just like a step further. And I guess I don't need to go all the way to building up buildings, but I think that's kind of cool. I can totally appreciate
That and
that.
actually getting to build the model is, I will be entirely honest, a big draw.
Hmm.
Mhm. You like the work too. You gotta like the workflow,
Yeah.
the individual steps of the process, not just the finished product.
It,
We when she was younger, I got to take her to San Francisco, and we walked down the Golden Gate Bridge, and yeah, right, that was really awesome. And it's at some level as a software engineer, it's like I'm never, I'm not gonna be able to take my kid into something that I built, and my daughter will have that option.
and yeah, it's not building the models physically is not the same as moving the mouse from one side of the screen to the other.
Hmm.
You're much more tactile.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I need that tactile.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Everybody kind of has their own thing, but that's cool that you figured that out and that you know that because
I
people
wouldn't have
in
been
life don't figure that
able,
out. Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to figure that out, at least not as quickly. If I hadn't done the LabVIEW courses, if I hadn't had that experience and went, yeah, this is fun, but it's not doing, if I do this, I'm going to need to pick up some creative hobby.
Hmm.
Right.
I'm going to have
And
to be happy.
Yeah.
well, and we've talked, Megan and I have talked about, so there's a lot of similarities between what we do developing software and designing buildings, right? There really are, and you can go to some really serious software architects and they'll tell you the same thing. But I think Megan was able to go through and look at this, the totality of the experience. Here's what I liked about doing this work
Hmm.
in software. These things I can find in architecture
With
and
the added creativity.
with all the other things that you're looking for.
Yeah,
So I'm not at all disappointed that she's not following in my footsteps. I think I did my job
Hmm.
and I showed her the world of work and I showed her enough that she could, you know,
go find the thing I'm actually going to enjoy.
go
Yeah.
find the thing you're actually going to enjoy.
I admire the
And
clarity. I think that's
yeah,
good.
and you know the kind of buildings that I like, and you're fairly certain you're going to like my work.
Oh yeah, which is good because I don't like most modern buildings.
There you go. All right. Well, it's been great.
Yeah.
But we've been going for quite a while. So this one's for you, Norm. Norm's always asking for longer episodes. So this one is.
Are we actually going to go our full like hour and a half or?
Yep. All right.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sam.
All right.
That's it for today's episode of the LabVIEW Experiment. Thanks for listening. If you have any comments or questions, head over to thelabviewexperiment.com and drop me a note. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at the LV Experiment.